prelude to the First World War, the United States was undergoing dramatic demographic changes. Immigrants from Southern and Central Europe were pouring into the country at the rate of 900,000 a year. But inside America, another kind of migration was underway, one that would go largely unnoticed until the latter half of the 20th century. Beginning around 1900 and lasting until the early 1960s, some 6 million African Americans migrated from the South to the North in what has become known as the Great Migration. They came north in search of a better life after the Southern states imposed the system of segregation known as Jim Crow, making a mockery of the freedom promised at the end of the Civil War. For some, the North would be the promised land. Others would find hardship after moving above the Mason-Dixon line. One of the most popular cities to attract Southerners was Philadelphia, in part because of its geographic location, and also because of its specialized industries. 6 members of Philadelphia's Germantown neighborhood give voice to both the promise and the disappointments of the largest internal migration in United States history.
If you look at the city of Philadelphia, first of all, it is significant because early on it begins as a place where the most significant free black population was here prior to the Civil War. And after the Civil War, and even before the Civil War, a number of African American institutions are established here. For example, the African Methodist Episcopal Church by Reverend Richard Allen. And so you look at it in terms of that. And also in terms of geography, Philadelphia is right between Washington, D.C. and New York City. And so when people traveled from the South, this would be a stop for them. And you also had one of the oldest African American newspapers that is still in existence, the Philadelphia Tribune. And so the Tribune would be advertising. And you had the shipyard here in terms of jobs. You also had a man by the name of Reverend Charles Tinley, who had Tinley Temple, and at his church he had programs geared towards migrants from the South to help assist them get settled here in Philadelphia. Oftentimes the North was called the Promised Land, and just like other Americans, they wanted to fulfill the American dream, which meant better job opportunities for themselves and their children, to be able to afford to get education, also to own property and so forth. So a lot after Reconstruction fails in the South, you have Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896, which basically legalized a system of segregation. And so African Americans were basically placed into a second-class citizenship by law, condoned by the U.S. Supreme Court, who made the decision. As people would migrate from the South, of course, usually sometimes males would come first. They would bring their families oftentimes later. If one person migrated, others would come to the communities where they had family and friends.
My first teaching job was walking distance from my house. Actually, my total working experience was in the school district of Philadelphia. I graduated from Cheney University. Then it was Cheney State College. And went into elementary education. Came into Philadelphia and got a job. And 30-some years later,
Martha Marty Young came to Philadelphia from Lylesville, North Carolina, to fulfill her dying mother's last request. The move eventually gave her the opportunity to pursue a long and distinguished career in education.
One of the things that she was trying to get across to my father on her deathbed was the baby. And he said, "What about the baby?" She knew she was dying. And she said, sisters. And he said, oh, to your sisters? The last word she said was, no, Philadelphia. My father had 3 sisters who lived in Philadelphia. He did what my mother said. A few weeks after she passed, we got on the train and came to Philly. He stayed a couple weeks and he went back to North Carolina to his job. My principal, who grew up in the neighborhood that I had grown up in, but he was, older, decided that there were 3 of us that should go back to college again and become something else. And at that time, I was a reading specialist. I was a reading teacher at his school. And I said, what do you mean something else? And he said, you should go for administration. So that's how I ended up going back to Temple to get a degree to become an elementary school principal. And those were the best years of my life. I lived at 15th and Stenton. They actually had the nerve to build a brand new elementary school at Gratz and Godfrey, walking distance from my house. I was blessed. I came out first on the list when I took the elementary principal's exam. I was really crazy. I applied for that school. At the interview, the district superintendent said, I was shocked to see your name on there. You just took the exam. Why did you apply? Why should I even think about you as being the principal of that school? I said, if you give it to somebody who's been a principal for 10 years because they've been a great principal, they will do what they've been doing for 10 years. But it was a wonderful experience to be able to walk to your elementary school, work there, and I had a ball. It was the best job of my life, just about the only job, because I stayed in the school district. I was trying to make 35 years, and the doctor pulled me at 33 for health reasons.
Young's perseverance in her field not only led to her eventual employment as a principal after going back to school to become an administrator, but it also inspired her daughter to pursue a career in education as well.
My daughter was helping me at one of the workshops, give out materials and things and register people. And she says, I can do this. I said, you can do what? Well, she had a program at Leeds Elementary School, and the parents wanted that program continued at King, and the person there wasn't sure that he wanted it. So she applied for it and was able to get approved to start a charter high school in our neighborhood. So the school district of Philadelphia and education has been great, not just for me and my daughter, but I have 2 granddaughters who both work in charter schools. Guess which one? Imhotep Charter High School.
The story of Ulysses Moore highlights why many African Americans headed north. He looked to the north as a land of opportunity, one where he would be able to secure a well-paying job in the public sector. Moore came to Philadelphia from Goldsboro, North Carolina, where Jim Crow prohibited him from getting the job he wanted most, as a city bus driver.
I was by myself when I left to come here, but some old lady that was standing there, she had 2 suitcases, and I had one. And so I started, you had to run because you don't know where the train gonna stop at. Because the train might stop down here, almost a block away, and might stop up there a block away. Because you don't know how long the train is. And so the train stopped about a block before it got to where I was standing there. And so I started to run for the train, and so you had to run because it ain't gonna stay there but a couple minutes. And so the lady said, well, wait, son, wait for me. Wait, get one of my suitcases. So I had to run back and get one of her suitcases, then run for the train on the back. You couldn't go in the front. You had to go in the back of the train. During that time, you had to go to the back of the train. And so I had about 2 cars back there that black could ride in. Couldn't ride in the front. And so that's what, we went in the back, got there. Just we got back there, we were ready to pull off. So we did get on the plane. Yeah.
When he got off, He landed a job as a machinist and 12 years later got hired as a bus driver for SEPTA, a unionized position that paid well.
So I had pretty good money during that time. And so that wasn't enough, so I left. So after about 15, worked about 15 years, and I wanted more money. So a friend of mine asked me if I ever thought about working with SEPTA. So I said no, I haven't thought about working with SEPTA because I make more money than SEPTA making now. So they said, well, that's not the point. The point is that if the Vietnam War ceased, you might be out of work.
Moore has fond memories of his 3 decades as a SEPTA driver. But there was one day he would rather forget, a day when the ugly face of racism pierced the veneer of civility in the city of brotherly love.
About 4 or 5 black kids came and got on the bus. They sat on the bus, and maybe about 5 minutes later, here come about 8 or 9 white kids come with hockey stick, baseball bats, and stuff like that. And so I had an almost brand new bus. They went to work on the bus. I had the door closed. They couldn't get in. I had the door closed, and they tore the windows out of the bus. They knocked the windows out. And so around the corner was a fire station. So we didn't have telephone on the bus during that time. No telephone. So I had to go to the bus and call the phone booth and call the police. So they came, and they locked the guys up, and locked some of them up. I don't know where to right one, because I couldn't tell them who they were because I didn't see them, I couldn't tell my 8 or 9 guys tell who they were, identify them. But anyway, they admitted that they did it. So anyway, it took them down 1801, and they go to court order for about three times. Court order. So ordered them, the parents had to pay for the glass to be put back into the bus. So that case was over. Cashier, that's a beautiful job. And all you do is sit down like I'm sitting right now, and somebody come through, hit the button, let them through, hit the button, let them through. And it was just beautiful, nice job. But I always had wanted to be a bus driver, and I loved it. This here is my, this is me, This is my niece, this is my niece, this is my sister, this is my sister, this is my sister, sister, my brother, my cousin, my niece, and my son.
And while Moore sees the best in life, today he worries about the differences between his generation and those that have come after him.
He called T-Bird, that nickname T-Bird. And on the wall, I saw the name, it's T-Bird, and so that's how I found it out. Number one, I made him go down there and watch that on the wall, and I went with him. Around the corner when I lived there, on the corner, I saw T-Bird on the wall. It was a brick wall, it was a brick wall, and the bricks was like, wasn't a slick brick, they were like a groove, and he had a hard time doing it, but I made him get it off. I was talking to my grandson last night, and he go to engineer school, and he was accepted in California because they got 30 people out of the United States. They go everything you paid for in California. They did about 6 weeks in California. Everything he paid for, and he went in the bunch out of 30 people. And it's in California, Sacramento, California, and so he don't think it's nothing. He don't think it's no big deal, but I do.
Much like Moore and Young, Tony Chandler came to Philadelphia and found work in the public sector. Originally from Kingstree, South Carolina, Chandler left the South following a visit to Washington, D.C. He couldn't wait to head back north, leaving with a few clothes and $1.50 in his pocket.
It was 1:30 in the afternoon, December the 28th, and we pulled out. And we traveled all night. Just turned 18, because I had a birthday December the 18th. And I had 50 cents. My mother gave me $1. And so I had $1.50, cardboard suitcase with some clothes in it. and I had my suit. I had a suit in the cleaner.
Chandler worked in Washington for a few years, but eventually decided there were greater opportunities farther north in Philadelphia.
So there was a bar there, Broad in Columbia, that after they said everything was integrated, you could have go in the bar, and but if you go in the bar, the bartender would serve you, and every time you finish your glass, he would throw it in the trash. And I thought it was like some kind of joke, you know. For first, I didn't believe it, but my friend that I was staying with, this was in either 61 or 62. It was one of those years. And so he came back home and he told me, he said, the guy just, I said, you got to be kidding. He said, yeah. And so actually I went with him, and that's what the guy did. He said, I should just sit here all night and then let him smash up all of his glasses. I said, nah, let's go, you know. I said, you know, they don't want us around. And then we left. But that's the only time I really, you know, I really feel it and experience it. But the segregation in the South, it was a vast difference. Because I grew up close to, there was 9 brothers. And we did everything together. We had a baseball team. We went fishing together. We went swimming together. We did everything together. And one afternoon, I was coming from my girlfriend's house, and they were all like standing out in the front of the church. And if I didn't know them, I would have been, I don't know what would have happened to me.
Really?
Yeah. Because the other guys didn't know who I was. And, you know, and they start, like, calling me the names. And then the guy, he looked at him, he said, hey, cut that out. He said, I know them. And that was it. The difference between the North and the South was, if somebody in the South don't like you, they come up to you and tell you to your face. And so you know to avoid that person. That's the difference.
That's the only difference?
That's the only difference. You know, if they don't like you, but if they like you, just like them guys that I was raised up with, if they didn't like me, they would have let them other guy attack me. So they, you know, they tell them, say, hey, I know them, you know, that's it.
After completing his GED and attending the Community College of Philadelphia, Chandler made the transition from metalworker to sandblasting coins at the U.S. Mint. After 12 years of work at the Mint, Chandler decided to retire. Horace Preston fled to Philadelphia from rural Georgia in fear of his life. It all began one day when Preston was a young man and went driving with his father on a country road. The car inadvertently struck a dog that belonged to a white owner. After refusing his offer of compensation, a group of white men gathered and threatened to attack Preston.
A day or so later, they came back down there, and they went by the house down in the woods and waited till it got dark. And all of them, about 2 cars of them, and all of them with armored guns. Just because I hate the dog had ran into the car and all that. So that's what they gonna kill me for. That's what it was up for. But they prayed to God, and they turned me over to him, because what they were facing, it was too much for for to deal with it like that. And they didn't want no violence. Just as I got to them, God took the fear out of it, took the nerves away from the leader. And he passed the word, everybody freed.
Preston's family decided that it was time for him to head north. In Philadelphia, Preston found work in a scrap metal yard, working for 7 cents an hour. Although the job was unionized, Preston said workers saw little improvement in their wages because their boss controlled the contract.
Because when this steward would come out, see how things were going, he would go in the office first, and the boss gave him a handful of cigars, and they sit down and talk. He'd tell them what he want and how he want it, and then he'd come out and tell us what to do. Whether you're doing this and you want to do that and everything. Well, that's the same thing the boss done told him. And so that's where we went along. We had to go along with it. The boss didn't want no strike. And so he would tell the union man, steward, leader, no strike. And I think the first raise he come out with was 1 cent. The union saying, you know, he come out there, well, that's all we can do. That's the best I can do, and all that, you know, and brainwash it into it. And so it was years and years before we started getting into the money.
Preston was among the growing number of African Americans who moved to Germantown. He noticed that as blacks moved in, longtime white residents moved out.
Well, when I first came to Philadelphia back in the 50s, Germantown was mostly white. And the colors started moving in gradually, kept moving in. As the color moved in, the white moved out.
James Mosley grew up on a farm in Georgia. His reason for leaving the South was a medical one, though not a decision that affected him directly. His father's health was declining, so Mosley's family made the decision to come to Philadelphia to get better medical care. The decision came too late.
Well, he was having eye problems, so we took him to Will Eye Hospital. I'm going to tell her that. Will Eye Hospital. It was a good hospital. So we went in there, you know.
Shortly after the family arrived in Philadelphia, Mosley's father passed away. He first worked in a mailroom and then got a job in a meatpacking plant in North Philadelphia.
Well, I was in the cut department. So he had two departments, one was to kill and one was to cut. And so they killed one day, and the next day they cut them up. Yeah. So I was all around, man. You know, actually, we never had no problem like that. I mean, we just did what we had to do, you know. We didn't have no racial problem between the white and the black. I mean, my family, most of it from my father, you know, like on the farm, you know. So we didn't have no racial problem, really. It's a little different. I mean, with the white and the black, because most in the southern state, people speak to you. And here, you know how it is here. You know, well, you live, you know. They might speak and they might not. Yeah.
Now retired, Mosley makes frequent trips to see his relatives in Georgia, and he travels around the country. James Annell Jefferson was born in Ahoskie, North Carolina, to a farming family. Her heritage is significantly different from most of those who took part in the Great Migration. Jefferson says she is not African American, but part French and part Cherokee. Still, Jefferson's history was affected by some of the same forces that fueled the Great Migration.
His father had left him two huge farms, French from France, and one was peanuts, the other was tobacco.
After growing tired of working the land, Jefferson's father moved the family north to Philadelphia, hoping to find more prosperity and quality education for his children.
So coming to the city was entirely different. You had places to go, things to do, and meet more people. You had neighbors, because at the farm there you had, it was so much land that belonged to my father that there was any houses no place near. It became co-ed, though I couldn't use my name. I was named after my grandfather. His first name was James. So they had to stop calling me James because there was other boys in the class, and when they would ask questions, my hand would go up with their hand, so they had to leave James off and start using my middle name, I know.
During her youth, Jefferson sometimes found her the target of bullying, as some of her classmates took her dark complexion to mean that she was African American. As she aged, however, she suffered the abuse less frequently.
Going 5 and 6 years old in school, they used to always pick on you. Not my sister, but it's me. My hair was long, and they used to always stick it in the ink wells in the back. I'm gonna go home with a blue shirt back every day. They follow you home. They always want to fight. That's the only time. That was the worst part of it. But then even junior high was the same thing. Not until I got to Overbrook. The whites accepted you, but it was the Negroes or mixed relations that different races that would always try to pick on you. My aunt was going to the movie, and I asked her, why aren't we going up to where the other people are going? She said, because we don't have to. Walk straight in, but it's all white. The Negroes are mixed. I was going up the stairs to the balcony, I guess it would be, because I never was up the top floor, so I don't know. It was in Hot Springs, because he was in the service, Coast Guards, and they used to send all the servicemen down there for vacation or to after rest up time, I guess. And we were coming from the Ostrich farm at the end of Hot Springs, Arkansas. Buses. And when I got on the bus, there was the second seat behind the driver was empty, so I let my husband, he went in to the window, and I sat in the aisle. And we're just sitting there talking, and then 4 white soldiers, they were dressed, youngsters, young, was standing, and I could feel somebody standing there, and I looked up, and he said, you're not supposed to be sitting here. I said, what do you mean? He said, you're supposed to sit in the back. I don't know if he said colored or Negro, whatever color. So I said, what do you mean? Any seats back there? He said, yeah. I said, I want to go sit in them. So my husband is nudging me because I didn't know why. He said, you're going to get me in trouble. I said, why? I guess he never had no trouble because he's hanging with the Indians anyway. The driver, I could see, because I was only 2 seats behind him, he was looking right at us, and he was laughing. He never said anything. So they stood there until they got tired, and finally they went in the back and sat down. Didn't have no more trouble.
After a long and successful career working in famous made clothing stores, Jefferson now finds herself an active member of Center in the Park, and at 96, she is its oldest volunteer.
The Great Migration, the interesting thing now is you see this shift, which was going on even during slavery, when enslaved Africans were attempting to escape bondage. They would head north. But by the time of the First World War and then the Second World War, when you have large numbers of workers who joined the military, there was a need for workers, and so African Americans start to migrate during the First World War. And so you see this shift in demographics where for the most part African Americans were in rural environments. They shift from these environments into urban environments, and so you see the growth of large cities. Now, with the census, there's a shift going back where African Americans are moving from the urban environments back into the South. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in another 10 or 20 years.